Ellie, are you able to hear us online?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Ellie, are you able to hear us online?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you not hear me? Yes, I can. Thank you. Oh,
Ellie, are you able to hear us online?
yes, I can hear you. Can you not hear me? Can you not hear me? I think there might be a slight delay in the sound. I'm just gonna maybe log off and log back on. Can you not hear me? Right back.
Yeah, we're getting some feedback here, so we'll.
Okay, I'm just gonna log back in. Try it again. I think there might be a Can you hear me now?
Okay, we think we have it figured out, but it was replaying on a loop here, so hopefully you don't hear this again.
Okay, I can hear you all just fine, so hopefully I don't repeat myself either.
Great. I'll call the September meeting of the Manatee Springs Planning Commission to order. First item of business is calling the roll. Commissioner Armstrong. Here. Commissioner Latimer.
Present.
Commissioner Wilson.
Present.
Commissioner Graybill.
Present.
Commissioner Casey.
Present.
Commissioner Storm. Here. And I'm Commissioner Delwich. Next, well, it's not on the agenda, but we always do item for anybody who wants to comment on items that are not on the agenda. This would be a time to do it. We don't really do much discussion, but if you have some bone to pick or something you're interested in that's not on the agenda, now would be the time. Okay, see no takers. Next item is approval of the minutes of the July 10th, 2024 meeting.
Motion to approve. I'll second that.
Okay. If there's no discussion, then all those in favor?
Could I have a point of clarification?
Yes.
Is for staff. Page 4 of the minutes, second paragraph, there was something I just didn't understand. The CPC makes final decisions on the request, but the demolition will be heard by city council. That's in reference to the Trading Post edition. What does the demolition mean?
Was it the?
Is it like
Was it the Trading Post? I
thought it was, I think it was the update on the
Green Willow, I believe.
either Green Willow.
on
Sorry, where was that? Which page?
last page, page 4, second paragraph.
That is on the trading post and that is a mistake on our part. I will modify that. and
There's no demolition.
There's no demolition.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, any other, no more comments, and all those in favor of the motion can raise your hand. Okay. And looks like I'm abstaining, and Commissioner Wilson, we weren't at the meeting, so we abstained. So now we'll move on to the business section of our meeting, and I'll just describe the process that we go through. We'll call an item for discussion. The planning staff will describe what the request is and what their findings and any recommendations they might have. And following that, we'll allow the applicant to make their case. And following that, we'll deliberate and vote either to approve, deny, possibly postpone or table it if there's some reason. And as we go through the process, we are focused on what our land use and development code says. We can't, based on our opinions or desires or whatever, we can't change what's in the code. If we just follow what's in the code, and that's how we make our decision. So with that, are there any conflicts or ex parte contacts to disclose? I see none. Now, I'm a member of the URA board, which has been involved with this, and as once there was an application, I've just sort of left the room whenever that's been discussed. So I don't feel there's a conflict, and the city attorney agrees. So with that, I'll call concept plan 2401, 123 Manitou Avenue concept plan.
Thank you, Chair Delwich. For the record, this is Chelsea Royston. Concept Plan 2401 is an application for 123 Manitou Avenue, which was previously developed with the La Fun Motel. That motel was demolished in 2023, and currently the site is vacant. The site is 2.2 acres and is unsubdivided. It is zoned commercial. And I have a couple of the dimensional standards there regarding maximum building height and maximum density. Maximum building height is 35 feet. Maximum density is 20 dwelling units per acre in the commercial zone district. The area surrounding this parcel is also zoned commercial. It is developed primarily with lodging uses to the north and east. To the south is Highway 24, and to the west is the old race car museum, which is currently vacant warehouse space. The purpose of a concept plan is to evaluate a proposed development prior to the applicant undertaking detailed planning and engineering work. We saw one of these last year. I do believe that this one will be a bit more straightforward. By evaluating the broad idea of a proposed development, staff and the Planning Commission can highlight areas of concern to help the applicant determine if the project is feasible. Here we have the proposed concept plan, which is for two 39-unit apartment buildings, which is 78 units total. The proposed development will comply with maximum building height requirements, or is proposed to as approximately as they can with their current phase of development of design. They propose 123 parking spaces with 20 attached garages, which will be under the kind of the interior portion of the buildings. And the proposed density is 35.4 dwelling units per acre. They would require a variance. Future applications, should this development go forward, would be a major development plan, which has supporting documents such as those listed there. We have a Tier 3 geologic hazards evaluation, which is required for any new or any major development plan. a landscape and irrigation plan, a drainage report, a traffic impact analysis, a lighting plan, and an ecological characterization study is also required because the site is within 500 feet of Fountain Creek. As I stated before, a variance is required for density. A minor subdivision is required because the site is not a wholly platted lot and therefore cannot obtain any building permits. And finally, a grading permit would be required as well. Just as part of the process overview, we are currently in preliminary reviews. This, as Chair Delwich mentioned, has been reviewed by the Urban Renewal Authority. They have submitted a letter in support of the application, which was part of the packet. It will be heard by the Housing Advisory Board next week, and that is all just for the concept plan. Moving forward, we have administrative applications, which is the minor subdivision that's reviewed administratively by staff. We have quasi judicial hearings, a major development plan, and a variance, which is heard by City Planning Commission. And then the major development plan also goes forward to City Council. And finally, there's the building permit review, which is the building and all of the grading and any other site work that's required. Here's just another look at showing which body is the recommendation body versus which body is the decision-making body. So for the concept plan, the City Planning Commission is the reviewing body. Though City Planning Commission is being asked to make a motion on this, it is a decision item. It is not actually preventing an application from coming forward. Should the Planning Commission decide that this is not does not have appropriate design for the city of Manitou Springs, the applicant can take that feedback and modify their application and then submit from there. So for the major development plan, again, that is reviewed by staff and planning commission, but city council is the final decision-making body. Staff reviews the variance, but planning commission is the final decision-making body. And then staff reviews and approves the minor subdivision and grading permit. I went into this a bit more in detail in the staff report for findings and review criteria. Overall, this plan seems to comply with the intent of the LUDC, the Land Use and Development Code. The second criteria is that the proposed land uses, densities, and intensities are consistent with the comprehensive plan and applicable zoning districts. As I stated before, the proposed density is in excess of what is supported in current zoning and in the comprehensive plan. However, it does, that could be remedied through a variance, which could bring it into conformity with those items there. The conceptual development, we do not know at this point if it will result in a higher risk to natural hazards or geologic hazards, as the Tier 3 geologic hazards report is part of the development application, not the concept plan application. So that's kind of a sticking point in our code currently. The proposed development is consistent with the dimensional design, development, and all other standards of the LUDC. Again, this does intend to comply with building height, setbacks, parking requirements, and all of those other dimensional and design standards. However, we cannot fully evaluate that at this phase of design. And finally, the proposed development provides adequate mitigation for anticipated adverse impacts to surrounding neighborhoods and the city. Multifamily residential is kind of a gray area between commercial and residential uses. So while the site is fully enveloped by commercial zoning and commercial uses, those uses are actually typically viewed as more intense than is multifamily residential. That being said, they are all the same zone district, and therefore mitigation is not we don't expect to require mitigation for any adverse impacts. Should the Planning Commission find it appropriate to approve the concept plan, staff does not recommend any conditions at this time. And here we have our motion language. And this concludes staff presentation.
Thank you. Any questions for staff before we move on to the applicant? Justin.
Chelsea, did you say that another city agency is looking at this next week?
The Housing Advisory Board, they are not a quasi judicial entity. So they will just be sort of reviewing and either kind of writing a letter in support or writing a letter in opposition or staying neutral.
Okay, I guess I have a clarifying question. It might be for the city attorney as well. I was looking at the code and I'm not an expert, but under the procedure section, it says we shall not make comments on a concept plan until all agencies that would typically comment on a development proposal have had a chance to review and comment. Is that what's not happening tonight? I guess I just want to make sure we can comment.
It's our interpretation that yes, we can, because it is not required to go before the Housing Advisory Board. And any other review agencies such as utilities, streets, stormwater, any of those, we don't have the level of design that is required for an evaluation by those agencies. Sorry about that. So at this point, all of the agencies, the City Planning Commission is the only agency required to review this at this level of design. So again, kind of an odd sticking point in the code that we could look at revising in the future.
Question.
Mike.
Concerning the density, you mentioned that the increased density remains within the overall framework of the commercial zoning district. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Can you show me where that was stated? Sorry. Just so I
It's right above the chart with the lot size and so forth. Setbacks. Page 3. Page 3 of your report.
Mhm. Sorry, I think that phrasing was really just to state that commercial zone districts typically allow a higher density of multifamily residential than do even our high density residential zone districts. So I think this zone district commercial is the most appropriate for a development like this, given that if we were to recommend rezoning, it would still need a variance. And it would require spot zoning of the parcel, which is ill-advised. So I think at this point, that's really just me saying that this is the most appropriate zone district that we have to offer. But even that, it would still require a variance.
Any other questions? Okay, next step, the applicants can come to the table and state your name and address for the record, and the floor is yours. And as you speak into the mic, you got to be really close, almost kissing the speaker, because it has to go out, to anybody watching online or recording.
Yeah. Josh and Adam.
We'll make an introduction. For the record, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Rich Block with Paragon Realty. We have an office address at 8700 North Street, Suite 310 in Fishers, Indiana. We are the owners and the applicant of the former La Fun Motel site. I think that the people that we'd like to introduce are two architects that are joining online, but I think they may have to be let in. I see Adam and I see Josh there, but my son, John Michael, is to my right, and he lives in the Denver area and was the one who introduced my company to the site in the area. Although my brother-in-law lives in Manitou Springs and has operated a store for years and years. So we've had some familiarity with the area. But good. Okay, so the team members that I did want to introduce, and they'll speak later, are with Kephart Design, Adam Cantor and Josh Robinson. And what I'd like to do with you all is to talk about some of the history of our involvement with the site, some of what we've done to date, lead into then some of the development planning and thoughts that we've put into the project. I will allow the Kephart architects to elaborate on some of this. I imagine you'll have questions as we go through things. I'll try and answer what I can, anticipating some of the questions that may be there, but certainly I presume that we'll have time afterwards to answer any other questions that you may have. So we, just as a quick history, we bought the property just over 2 years ago. At that time, actually, my son was the one who found out about the La Fun Motel, and when my company basically had some exchange money, 1031 exchange money. So we were forced into a pretty quick timetable, but we worked with the URA. At the time when we bought the property, you may remember the city had revoked the operating license of the motel. I can't speak to all the history, but I know there were problems that existed. The site was expensive on its own, but also had asbestos that existed throughout the property. So when we or shortly after we bought the property, we demolished it and then properly abated that asbestos from the site. We've tried to keep the site clean and protected while the time has gone by, and it is hard to believe that it's been 2 years. I can tell you, when we went through the demolition, we encountered all sorts of interesting activity that existed at the motel, and I can just imagine that was a problem. I also know that when we were involved, it was a challenging time for the city. In that, at that time, I think there was a proposal in Colorado Springs, a referendum that was being proposed that was going to greatly impact the tax revenue to the city. And, that was a concern, understandably, but we were in a situation, as I said, we bought this with 1031, and there were very strict timetables for reinvestment. And so we had to close on the property within that time frame. I will also say that after we purchased it, and really originally thought that our intention would be for commercial redevelopment of that site. That's primarily what we do. In fact, we talked to a number of different retailers. Unfortunately, weren't able to get traction with them. But those included, grocery, coffee, and probably some less desirable other commercial users. But we had a number of people that had expressed early interest. But, honestly, it's a tougher time right now. And I think that's driven by higher construction costs, the capital environment being what it is. But bottom line is, we were not able to get any traction with those commercial users. So we started thinking about, what other options might exist. We are well aware, in fact, had early conversations with Hannah before she left. I think, Chelsea, you may have been involved in that discussion too, about doing a residential development there. We had done a number of layouts that I would tell you were much more intense. I mean, having a unit count of nearly 130 units on the site. There were structured parking being proposed, and Bottom line is, from some of that feedback early on, we went away from that plan. But, probably about that same time, we got introduced to the Kephart architects. And for us, one of the first goals for us is to make sure that it is an attainable rental that is going to be provided. In fact, I should have said this as we looked at uses. We talked to a number of affordable housing. These are tax credit housing developers about this site. And I'm going to allow my son to explain more about some of the difficulties, particularly with the census tract that exists in Manitou, and how it's a very time-consuming and uncertain process going through the tax credit and the applications. But unfortunately, we weren't able to make any headway there. But we also knew that and have heard that there is at least a pretty strong demand for housing and a need for housing within Manitou. So our hope is that the proposal that you're seeing, and this concept plan for me, honestly, is new and different. I've sat on both council and planning commission roles myself. But I appreciate that this is a way that it's my understanding that we get the feedback from you prior to making an application. But we've intentionally tried to limit what our application is down to a variance on density. I might, I don't know if maybe one of the Kephart architects could pull up the site plan, because I'd like to offer a few comments to that, and then I'm going to really turn over some of the more detailed conversation about design and such to the Kephart folks. But the site plan that you see, this concept plan, is one where we tried very hard to address some of the concerns that we were told existed. We were told there was concern about the Holiday Inn Express and its size and massing along Manitou Avenue, that was a concern. Because you could lay this site out, and we actually had a site plan that provided for a building that fronted the entire, like turning that 90 degrees, basically, right? That site plan that you see to the two buildings, but one of the buildings would be oriented along Manitou Ave. We knew that was something that was not going to be appealing. So we, in fact, limited the frontage that you'll see along Manitou Avenue. We're going to have a feature at the center of the development. There will be a retaining wall. You probably know there's a grade difference between Manitou Ave and 24. So there'll be a retaining wall along that south wall, but all the parking will be beneath there. And then there'll be parking underneath as well that's going to be provided. The second and last thing that I will say, because I hope that you'll appreciate some of the more particular design input that Kephart provided, is we knew that the size was a concern along Manitou Avenue. So we have stepped back the building along Manitou Avenue so that above 2 stories, there'll be a balcony so that you will only see 2 stories there along Manitou Avenue directly. And we'll have some sort of patio feature that will exist at that 3rd story there. It will step back, though, to units that will be above that as you go south. But at least along Manitou Avenue, that will be just 2 stories that you see there. I do think this is probably a good time to allow, maybe I'll start with Adam Cantor with Kephart and allow him to speak more to some of the design considerations. And then I think Josh will address some of what he tried to do to incorporate into that design.
Thanks so much, John. And again, thank
Excuse
you.
me, Adam,
you.
for the record, could you state your name and address?
I sure can. Yep. My name is Adam Cantor. I'm with Kephart, and we are at 2555 Walnut Street in Denver, Colorado. So yeah, again, thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to show you the thoughts that have gone into this plan and gotten us to this point. And we're also real excited to hear your feedback And hopefully you'll be as excited as we are once we've told you the story here. So John did a real great job of describing this plan, and I think I can maybe just illustrate a few of the details that he didn't cover, or maybe just provide some clarification. So a couple things that we've said, right? So number one, 78 units. And what we're proposing is two identical buildings. Obviously, they are mirrored, each of 39 units. And the reason we achieve 39 is because we are providing amenity space in both of these buildings. So again, they are identical, but they will both probably have a different amenity space. So potentially a leasing in one and a workout or a business center in the other. We haven't gotten to that level of detail just yet. But so as you can see, that's why we land at 40 units. So when we talk about parking within the building, we're not necessarily talking about structured parking as you may think of a concrete parking garage or a podium concrete deck underneath the building. What we're talking about are tuck under garages. And so where we remove units on the ground level and there are garages, and this can come in the configuration of garage doors. It could be an open carport. There's lots of different ways that can happen, but it helps us to achieve a bit more parking by, again, parking inside of the footprint of the building. And it also does reduce density by pulling those units out. When we use a building of this typology, we also get a parking space that is outside of that parking garage, which we call a tandem parking space, and inside of your code, and it is allowed to help us meet the parking minimums. And so as you can see, we are just right there with this site plan. We are able to meet the required parking on site, which was a big push from we're just trying to limit the amount of asks, right? We don't want to put you out. We don't want you to have to make a lot of hard decisions. We want to try to fit within the code as it's prescribed. So as John also alluded to, the building steps back along Manitou Avenue. Something that we heard loud and clear was we wanted to avoid a canyoning effect along Manitou. That even though there's a build to requirement, the residents and the users of this street didn't feel comfortable with buildings right up on that sidewalk, and we're not trying to create a very intense urban environment. And so what we're showing here today, and again, this is just a diagram down here. Please don't look at this as design of the building. It's just blocked out to show you that there are punched openings for garages and that the building does step back. We'll show you a little bit more detail here in a while. But as you can see, the building steps back at Manitou, right? So we're lowering the impact of the building along the street, and it's creating more of a pedestrian scale, something that is important to feel comfortable as you're walking up and down. And then that does come with opportunities, right? So some may say, oh, you're losing a whole unit by doing that, and that's a detriment. But to us, we really see it as an opportunity to create an additional amenity for our residents. It could be a deck that is available to potentially all of the residents of this new community, or it could be an extension of one unit. I don't know that we really are going to get into those kinds of square footage, as John said. We are trying to keep this attainable. So most likely it becomes an amenity deck, but it takes advantage of this really unique place, right? These buildings are landed in such a unique environment with views in every direction. And we really wanted to maximize the ability for our residents to be outside and to enjoy those places and those locations. All of these units you'll see later too also have balconies. So that is more of their private outdoor space. And again, helps to really land these buildings and have them exist where they are and take advantage of everything that Manitou has to offer. There's not a ton of detail here. As you can see, these are empty boxes. We haven't gotten into unit design. We haven't gotten, maybe some basic square footages. We do know that there's some studios, there's some 1 beds, and there's 2 beds. And that's where we want to keep those square footages in a place where we can build them efficiently so that we can keep the rent as low as we can, right? Again, LIHTC isn't an option here, but we want to do everything that we can to try to minimize the rents so that folks who work in Manitou can live in Manitou. That's the goal. The parking is laid out, in between these two buildings. We looked at lots of configurations, as John also alluded to, and spun this around, and it's just this was the only one that worked. In order to get access to the street, in order to get fire trucks up against the buildings in the places that they need to be, in order to handle the grade, this was the configuration that we landed on, and it became sort of push and pull from there. So you can see the way the parking is laid out in an auto court configuration. We're doing everything we can right now to try to break up that parking. We don't want it to be perceived as a large parking field. So the goal will be to include some sort of median that we can plant. It most likely will be wide enough to have a sidewalk. Maybe there's room for a bench or two, and that will help folks circulate back and forth between the two buildings and to any amenity that we might be able to include that closer to Highway 24. Another major element, as Rich was speaking, he was talking about the signage, right, that was out there, and Josh will talk about this a bit more in a moment, but we'd love to be able to preserve that sign if we can, and to have it part of our streetscape as the buildings are addressing that street and creating a welcoming environment. We're talking about a dog run in the back, potentially. That could be any kind of outdoor space. It could be patio, could be barbecue decks, could be, I don't know, hammocks from two trees. But that's the space that we've got. And so we want to make sure that we are utilizing every piece of ground on the site. So again, we're being as efficient as possible. One more point, and then I'll turn it over to the fun stuff. Is again the reason we're pursuing identical buildings, the reason we're trying to stack our units, the reason that you see we're trying to maximize the density with the parking is because those things lead to efficiency and constructability. And if we can efficiently build these buildings, we can keep the costs down on the development side, which has a direct relationship to what the rent will be at the end of the day. So again, we're trying to hit all the code items. We're trying to create a space that fits in with the history, that fits in with the place, and provides a much needed service, being housing for the city of Manitou. So I'll turn it over there to Josh, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we arrived at not just this solution, but what we think the building wants to look like as well.
Well, thank you, Adam. I'll state my name, Josh Robinson with Kephart Architects, and again, 2555 Walnut Street. So I'll grab the screen from you, Adam. Okay. Right. All right. Is everybody seeing my screen?
There it is.
Fantastic. So the first thing that Adam and I will do, and I'm actually going to turn my screen down so I can draw on my screen too, but you won't be able to see me anymore. But the first thing that Adam and I will do when we start digging into a project is learn as much as we can about the place. What is Manitou? And who are we to come into a community and say this is what it should be? We want buildings and projects to come from, inherently from their place. Where's the place going? What was its history? What made it what it is? Let's understand it. And that's where we always start. For us, we went back, all the way back to the 1890s. So we're back here, 1898, and understanding what was Manitou. Of course, we knew, Colorado City, Colorado Springs, by God, the TB capital of the world. All of these places, especially in the latter part of the 19th century, really became resort towns. They were incredible Victorian resort towns that were within distance of Denver. Short train ride, really. Of course, we've got all of the different tribes coming down here for thousands of years. It's a holy place. All this Wild West history and these fun, this is as Colorado as it gets, the Colorado City Hose House Company, all of this stuff, the false fronts. And what was special about it beyond what we saw in the rest that Adam and I will typically see in the rest of the state, is this investment in place. And it was related to that whole resort situation that was happening, tourism. I mean, my gosh, folks moving the cliff dwellings to Manitou at this time. It's really unprecedented. We followed the town up through the 40s. As we all know, after the crash, 1893, the silver crash, Colorado in general really hits a low point and takes a long time to come back. Of course, by the 1960s, after the war, Denver, Colorado, Colorado Springs especially, really booming at a national average that really outpaced most of the country. Manitou, though, an interesting thing happened about, I believe it was 61, Highway 24 comes through and actually bisects a big part of the town. And our site is located over here. Of course, we had all the incredible views looking over Garden of the Gods and up behind us as well. But we sort of got cut off after the 60s. To dive into this a little bit more, what are the actual buildings that we're looking at? Of course, we know that a lot of these actually still exist in some form or another. But these massive Victorian fantasies, just incredible stuff. And at a time when we had so much engineering happening in our state, as far as all the mine technology, the incline railroad and all this kind of thing, but incredible buildings that we wouldn't have seen just up the hill, say in Cripple Creek or somewhere like that. And of course, all the tourism stuff that we were talking about, the resorts, the springs, the cliff dwellings and all of that. And as we all know, this continued well into the middle 20th century, and this is Manitou Springs. This is this whole rebirth period. I love these pictures, and it's the same stuff that we saw in the 19th century, but now it's for the 20th. You've got these folks wearing cowboy hats and driving cars that are, rocket ships from space. Meanwhile, it's sitting in a dirt parking lot in front of this ancient cliff dwelling. Just very romantic, very Colorado. And we just totally geeked out on this stuff. And of course, it really hit home when we look at our particular site in general, the LaFawn. This is an very early, I think late 30s motel site. And this was during this whole period when cars finally are becoming dependable enough that we can go places in them. The roads are getting good enough. We can go. And all of these roadside motels pop up. So the big Victorian fantasies are kind of being replaced by these contemporary modern buildings. This matchbook cover here, you can see the LaFawn in its original configuration. Very clean, very simple, square, stucco, white boxes. Of course, this was the period when you could pull your car up next to the motel unit, almost like a cluster of cabins. That survived well into the 60s, I believe. Well, actually, I think it was 53, early 50s, when the second level was added and LaFawn was remodeled. Of course, that was about the same time that we got the big iconic sign. And, it was overall a very simple, clean, simple building. The character of Manitou. When I first came to Colorado, Manitou was actually one of the first places I probably within a few weeks, maybe 2 weeks of me moving to Colorado, was one of the first places I actually made an effort to go and visit, because all of the roadside architecture that was still present I mean, your streets are full of these incredible mid-century hotels that are just wild in the middle of the Old West. You know, the Silver Saddle, the Park Row Lodge, the Ute Trading Post, the Mecca Motel, and it's all of this fun stuff. And in a town that didn't get rid of it, it didn't disappear. I recently learned that the Green Willow Motel is going away. I hope that they keep the sign. So we got excited about the Old West. We got excited about going back to the 19th century, all the 20th century stuff, and the cool kind of things that are going on there right now. So we buttoned that all up and started to think about, well, what would that mean as far as our buildings? You know, the site plan that we just showed a few minutes ago really replicated at least in a similar shape, what we saw at the old Lafon. These buildings centered around this great sign. We thought about these buildings. Like I said, they were very clean, very simple, all white with this shocking blue-green that was so popular at the time and reflected the color of the sky, sort of the jade jewelry of all of the different Indian tribes and things like that. But we thought about the Lafon in general. You know, what was this trying to do? This was a building that was all about horizontal ribbon windows. It was a serious piece of modernism. We looked at you know, textbook modern buildings like this. Of course, we didn't want to build just a building from the 1950s or something like that. We want it to be contextual, but still something of our time. We looked at, you know, different patterns from the Ute tribes and stuff like that. Jewelry that would have this whole Western theme to it. That's a big part of it. The abstract clay pots, all this stuff, but keeping it very modern and very simple. We thought about a lot of the roadside architecture that we saw, that there might be a way to pick up on these geometric symbols and you know, and all this stuff and do it in a respectful and contemporary way, something that was born of the place. The drawing here at the center that these photographs are around is where we landed. It's a very simple building, very clean, really honest, and rather timeless. It was something that drew a lot of inspiration from Lafon, but also from the Old West as far as its simplicity and its honesty in materials. You can see how this bold move along the street celebrates our amenity area, bringing the scale of the two-story building down even more and appealing to that whole fun mid-century roadside architecture that you guys really are blessed to have. Of course, here in the middle between the two buildings, keeping the Lafon signage and restoring that. Quiet materials, things that would be recognizable as a home as well. Horizontal siding, things that you might see on your own house, but done in a contemporary way. We're imagining very hardy, very durable materials, all cementitious, all cement-based sidings. Again, the jade accent comes back from the old Lafon, but you can see how it starts to really pay homage to its place. That was important for us, was to work in a language that was born of the place and not of, you know, a whim or a will.
So Rich, maybe you want to jump back in, or Josh, if you got a couple more.
I don't know if he dropped his phone. He stopped
No,
suddenly.
I'm sorry. No, no,
Okay.
that was everything I had to share.
Okay.
No, I didn't want to interrupt you. Thank you, Josh. Just a comment first about what Kepart's done and really the appreciation that I think they have given to the community to really give a lot of thought to what this looks like, to try and incorporate elements in the design that we think blend in well. I know we are very pleased with what they've done. I honestly, personally can say I've never worked with architects that do the level of review of a community before coming up with a plan. So I hope you all appreciate it. I know personally I do. I think it's very attractive. I did want to speak to one other comment. Mr. Casey, I think you asked about this and the density comment. And just as a point of reference, I believe the Holiday Inn Express, now this isn't maybe a totally fair comparison, but it does speak to the density, the mass that exists there. That site is itself on point, or it's a total of 0.95 acres. There are 63 rooms on that site. So if you will, about 66 units per acre. Now, it's not a totally fair comparison, but I do think our variance request, and we are down to that density, is much, much less than that. So I just thought the reference would be helpful, but I think at this time, we should probably turn it over to you all if you all have questions, but we sincerely appreciate the opportunity to present.
Sure. Yeah. Before we get started, one more thing. Could you share, for the benefit of people who haven't been involved with the URA process, how they participated, both financially?
Well, sure. Thank you. So again, this goes back about 2 years ago, and a URA plays a role not just in Manitou, but I think in so many different communities to help promote development. And I think I'm trying to remember how we got introduced, but I think you may have, John Michael, gotten introduced to Jim Reese. Jim was the executive director, still is the executive director of the URA. And honestly, it boiled down to the site itself. I think it cost about $2.6 million to buy. I mean, on its own, the land is just far too prohibitive. But when we had approached the URA about ways in which they could help and we could obtain assistance to help acquire, when we totaled up the demolition, the acquisition, it was well north of $3 million. So the URA came in with its money. We had a tight time frame I mentioned earlier because of our timing. I know the mayor had spoken at the URA about his concern about that, but I hope that in the end, what step the URA did is the first step to help obtain control of the property, help initiate the development. I would have liked to have had a grocery store that we could have developed on it, but unfortunately we couldn't get traction with them. We think this is exactly what meets a big need within the community. So I think that the URA its purpose is to help assist development. There are probably others on the board that might be able to speak to that, but I'm not sure if that answers your question, sir, or not.
No, I just want the, clarification that they did participate financially.
Oh, of course. Yes.
Okay, I'll open it to David.
Can we know what their participation was?
Okay, it was, I'm going to total up. It was a 2.1.
2.1.
So $2.1 million came in from them. That was for both the acquisition, the demolition, and the asbestos abatement.
Other questions?
Yeah, so the URA provided 2.1, and what did you provide?
We came in with $1.1 million. Right. I will tell you, I mean, again, sitting on councils, I mean, there are participations that municipalities make, and it's very much a public-private partnership, and that's the way we viewed it, and it was significant. But had that not been there, I know for us, we wouldn't have been able to justify the purchase.
Other questions? Okay, David.
Do you have projected rents that you would plan to charge?
So we have goals right now. We're in the middle of our pro forma, but the units that we're gonna try and achieve are a mix of studios, 1 bedrooms, and 2 bedrooms. The percentage of 2 bedrooms will be on the, I think it's 24% or something like that. The studios will likely be in the, well, our goal is that they'll start in the $1,300s per month, $1,300 per month, you know, in that level. And the 2 bedrooms will be more expensive, but in the 1,900 for the 2 bedrooms. So they'll be in that range. I would tell you that it's still all projected, but that's our goal. I don't think that's far off of actual, you know, tax credit housing, but we know that's an important part is when we speak about attainable, that's what we mean is trying to keep the rents down. And I think the Kephart guys did a good job of articulating that there's a lot of sensitivity in the building design and layout that helps keep it being efficient. But it's also important to get the number of units to get to a rent that works. And that's been the challenge, I suppose.
Okay, anyone else? I'm curious, like, do you have living space on the ground floor? On the first floor?
And Adam, maybe you can jump
Yep.
in here, but I'll let you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes is the answer. Josh, I'm going to steal it back from you just for a moment. I got the right one. So yes, on the ground floor, it's a combination of garages, units all along the backside, back here, and on this corner here, and then amenity space. So yes, if we look at this diagram, every box that you see, less this one here, is a residential unit. And so again, the amenity space is intended to activate the street. Everything else is a unit. And the way this building remains efficient is that you can't really tell, but these larger boxes are 2s. That's a 1. These are studios here. Sorry, I'm drawing with my mouse. And these stack up. So it's a stack of 3 2-bedroom units. And by stacking them up, the way that gains efficiency is the plumbing goes straight up and straight down. We're not trying to jog it around or move it here and there. We would make every effort to have similar kitchens in each unit so we can buy as many of the same cabinets, as many of the same dishwashers, as many of the same refrigerators as possible to help us, again, find those efficiencies and keep the costs down.
Okay, the reason I asked that question is I think you need to be aware that this property is in a flood zone. It's in the Sutherland Creek flood zone, and I don't know what the ramifications are that if it means it's not buildable or occupiable on the first level, but I can think of 2 situations over the last 20 years where projects got well underway before, you know, that it was noticed like, oh darn, we can't
No,
live in
thank you.
this.
We are very well aware. So
Okay.
we are doing a map revision with FEMA. And unfortunately, this has taken an incredible amount of time, but it started upstream with another project. I'm going to let my son, who really has coordinated that, but we are aware. We are literally days, if not weeks away from getting that, but
Yeah, so the history there is essentially when Highway 24 was installed in 1961, there used to be a creek that went almost directly on the west perimeter of our property. When Highway 24 was installed, that creek was turned west and it meets Fountain Creek just near the entrance of Garden of the Gods. So it's that area that we're in is called an undefined flood zone, just because of the uncertainty. We had a bunch of tests done. We're 30 or 40 feet above Fountain Creek on the north side of the Holiday Inn Express. So they don't suspect any issues, and it's really just a formality at this point. We're in the final stages of the FEMA LOMR, the letter of map revision.
Okay, I just wanted you to
no,
be
thank you.
aware,
Thank you.
you know, it's because that could be a big factor if you know, because you know, it's Sutherland Creek, not Fountain Creek, that's involved with this zone. And you know, back in '99, we actually had a flood, and there was a river going down Manitou Avenue where it came, right at the overpass.
Mm,
Sutherland Creek came down, and it's just good to be aware of
sure,
that
sure.
up front. Thank you. Anything else? Oh,
In your, excuse me, in your sort of bio that you gave us about your company and so forth, it mentions that you'll be responsible for the planning, execution, financing, development, and management of the project. You also said that you have more expertise in commercial management and commercial building.
That is
So-
most of what we do,
Okay.
right?
So if and when this is built, then who does the management of it? Will you hire somebody to do that? Will you sell the project? What?
Yes. So no, the intention is not to immediately sell. I mean, might we sell in the future? Perhaps, but we have two partners. I mean, it's not unusual. I think you can appreciate to hire a third-party general contractor. So CSI from Colorado Springs we've been talking with them. They are the ones who've helped prepare preliminary budgets with us. So I think besides management, a contractor partner is important, but they are a specialty multifamily builder. And then on the management side, Ms. Latimer is Griffith's Blessing, also out of Colorado Springs. And in fact, we toured two properties with them today, but we've been in discussions with them. They actually have an arm of their company that specializes in. So while for you all, this might be considered a larger project, it's actually very small. I mean, that is, for most developers, they want to do 200 units. And so that's where a dedicated staff can be placed on that project, maintenance, management and leasing. But we met one of their managers, whether she'd be assigned or not, I can't say, but they have the ability, because they're local, to manage 2 or 3 different properties. So I think we've got team members that are excellent and really, hopefully, them by name and by reputation.
One quick one. Have you given any thought to a space for visitor parking, and is that possible?
Early on, we did. I think there were discussions that this, I think, was even before we bought the property. I don't know that we can accommodate that now based on existing code. So,
Well, Rich, typically, and as is in Manitou, the code does include guest parking spaces, right? So the way the code is written, it's a ratio per unit for bedroom, Riley. So if a studio and a 1-bedroom are 1.5 parking spaces per unit, and a 2-bedroom is 2 parking spaces per unit. In that formula, it's written so that guest parking is included. So that's.
I'm sorry, Adam. I thought the question was more directed because I think there was some discussion about general visitor parking for Garden of the Gods and the incline in Manitou, but maybe more directly related to the project. So thank you.
Directly related to the property.
Thank you.
I can't speak for the team, but hats off to you guys for doing this project and saving the sign and looking into the research, and it's exciting and good for you guys. The one thing I don't understand personally is the tandem parking. So if somebody is in apartment A and has the garage space, and then somebody in apartment B parks behind them, how does that?
It doesn't exactly work that way, right? So if the way that the garages are designed is that they are adjacent to a hallway. There is no direct access to a unit from the garage. So anybody in any unit could rent a garage, and then the tandem parking space automatically comes with that garage. So you would only have residents from one unit, whoever decided they wanted that garage, parking in the tandem space. You would not have multiple units using those.
Okay, so if a tenant had 2 cars, then they would have the garage and the spot behind them.
Even if they had one car, they would have the garage in the spot behind them. Yes, that's sort of the nature of that way that lays out. The issue comes, and the reason we went that direction comes from the dimensionality of the site. And if we were to, typically we would like to see, if we were not to have these garages, and this would have been a way to increase the unit count, right? We absolutely could have said, we need more units, let's not do these garages. But then at that point, we would have needed more space on the ground between the end of the parking and where the building begins, because you'd have somebody's front door or balcony or something happening out there, and you'd want a landscape zone and a sidewalk and some other things that make it livable in that configuration. So in this configuration, it operates very similarly to a single family home, maybe just skinnier, right? I mean, somebody parks in the driveway behind the garage, and you have to move your car in the morning for your wife to get out.
Thank you, Adam.
Any other questions? David?
I understood when you said the only variance you were asking for was on density, that you wanted to limit the number of decisions that the community would have to make, both this body and I think probably far more importantly, city council. Would it be, I don't know if this is a fair question or not, you tell me, but would it be desirable to you to have less to get a variance on parking?
Absolutely. Less parking would allow for more open space, for more amenity area for our residents, right? It could, but less parking could potentially allow us to increase the unit count to provide more housing for Manitou. Absolutely. Now, there is a point where it becomes detrimental to the project when you don't have enough parking, because then you have folks trying to park in the neighborhood, or you become less marketable and your project becomes less desirable if you can't accommodate the needs of your residents. So I think there's a gentle push and pull there that could be helpful, but it wouldn't want to be, say, we want to reduce this to one space per unit, because there isn't really, as far as I know, there isn't amazing mass transit, right? I mean, they're not walking on to light rail, and so I think just to remain marketable, we need to accommodate our residents.
Well, I appreciate that answer. What makes sense to me, but may not be consistent with the community as a whole, or certainly the land use code, but aiming for that sweet spot where you have enough parking, but you're not paving. And you can see from the site plan, there are 2 buildings and parking. There's a few trees.
Yeah, this is very conceptual, right? I mean, but yes, I mean, we are meeting the code requirements for building coverage, right? We're underneath what that code requirement is. So really, the only code item that is we are exceeding is that density.
I think your point is a good one, and I also can appreciate what Adam's saying is it's kind of a fine balance to make sure that the property has adequate parking for visitors and others, but doesn't have any more than it needs. Maybe what I would like to suggest is because I don't have a full appreciation without talking further with the design team, but also maybe to work with staff. If there are trade-offs that can be made from the design side that maybe help address some of your concerns, or maybe add an element of additional landscaping area that can be balanced, I would love to continue to work towards that.
Okay, there are no more comments at this time. Well, you can sit back and we'll bring you back if we have more questions. And now I'll open this hearing to the public. If anybody in the audience would like to comment on this, now would be the time. Good evening. I'm John Maynard. I live at 1320 Indian Oaks Place in Manitou. I should let you know that I am a member of the URA board, but I missed the last meeting. This is the first time I've heard this presentation. So my comments are based on what I heard tonight. I have really two comments. The first one addresses your comment, sir, about parking. As you probably know, the city is in the process of creating a brand new public parking space where the Dillon Motel used to be. And my understanding that it's scheduled to be open in a year or so. And I've been following this fairly closely, by the way. And I suggested to the city administrator just a week or so ago that it would be appropriate for the city to allow essentially evening parking for guests or other business users in the URA area, general area, to make use of the parking lot there at a reduced cost, similar to what's done on the westernmost city parking lot. Also available for residents at a reduced cost. So that's an opportunity for the Paragon folks that they may not have known about. And it may address your issue or your question about whether or not there's enough guest parking in the evenings for someone who might have a party or what have you. It's what, 2 or 3 lots away, very close, but across the street. The second comment that I would like to make is, and I'm going to preface this by a little bit of information about me. I was a land use planner in my career, almost 50 years of land use planning work. And to me, one of the key issues from a planning standpoint is context. And what does context mean? How does this site relate to the sites that are near it? And I think that this site plan has addressed that very well. The building that's proposed is 2 buildings that are proposed are very similar to what was there before in terms not only of density, but or intensity of use, but bulk and scale. And to me, those are important qualities. So as planners, you should be looking at context as well. And the buildings near it are similar in scale and the intensity of use is similar in scale. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
I need a little education on the URA and the funds contributed. Are there any strings for the developer? So URA contributed $2.1 million to the project. For what?
Well, there are strings. There's a very complex agreement. One of the provisions of the agreement is if certain actions didn't happen within a timely manner, then the URA was reimbursed money, and that happened this month or past month, I believe. What we essentially did was advance funds that would have been eligible for this person, this developer, for infrastructure costs that are essentially reimbursable. And the URA has done this on other projects. The Adams Cafe received this type of a grant, as did the Holiday Inn. And there may have been others. I'm not, those are the 2 that I am familiar with. But yes, there's a fairly complex contractual agreement with this particular landowner. And I mean, the provisions include what happens if they decide to sell and what on and on and on. And we would have to, I'd probably have to get help from other members of the board to explain some of those.
That answers it. I just wasn't sure. I'm not familiar with it. And so I didn't know, is it a grant? Is it free and clear or not? So thank you.
It's not exactly free and clear, but it is, it's in the form of a payment. And for instance, the asbestos mitigation was one of the eligible reimbursables. And so we paid in advance for that so that we could remove that. You know, our goal was to remove blight and to encourage development. And this was a blighted property. Mr. Block didn't mention to you, but when they did the demolition, you know, during the interim, when the city took the business license and the time when they acquired the property, there were 2 or 3 fires in the property. There was no management on site. They remedied that, of course, by removing the building. They also removed a couple of meth labs. So this was obviously a blighted property, and there were activities there that we don't want in our community. So I think that by the URA helping advance the funds that they would have been able to apply for in the similar agreement at a later date, we essentially removed the blight and removed the problems that existed on the site. Thank you. Hey, would anybody else in the audience like to comment on this? I don't see anyone online. So with that, I'll close the public comment portion of the hearing and we can discuss it. Aaron, I was wondering, can you bring up some of the land use code? I think it's relevant to this discussion. And the variance section 1806.4.2, section F. And, you know, the reason I'm bringing this up, you know, believe it or not, I've been on the planning commission for 25 years. And we've struggled over the years with having a rational, fair process for granting variances. It got very subjective over the years to the point it was meaningless. And at this point, we're being asked to basically allow 175% of the allowable density. And so my question to this commission is, how can we rationalize that without breaking our zoning code? You know, we spent I think a year and a half debating this. We had a citizens committee, we had multiple work sessions, we had 3 public hearings, and we came up with specific dimensional standards and expectations. And so now, you know, I don't know if it's really visible, but you know, my challenge is yeah, if you go to full screen, I think it would help. You know, there's 6 criteria, and our code says to grant a variance, we must meet 4 out of the 6. And I struggle to find 2, much less 4. So I need some help there, how we can rationalize this without basically breaking our code.
Can I don't think we should be talking about the variance.
Well,
This is
the reason I'm doing that is if you look at the specifics of the concept plan, the purpose, the concept plan allows for an evaluation of the proposed development before detailed planning and engineering work is undertaken and before substantial expenses have been incurred by the applicant prior to submission of a final application. I don't want the applicant to spend tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars coming up with a great plan that people like, but that then we're stuck trying to rationalize a variance. And it's so germane to this development. We're not talking, 21 units or 22 units per acre. We're talking almost, at least 75% more than what our code allows. And what comes to my brain is, if this is the passion that the community wants, the URA wants, people want, the appropriate process, rather than breaking our code, would be starting with the process of changing the code, changing the density, adding a zone district, somehow coming up with a mechanism. Otherwise, if we have 6 criteria and an applicant meets 1 out of the 6, where 4 are required, we're opening the floodgates for anybody, in fairness. And this is a problem we've had over the years, is our variance process has been so ignored. And that was one of the key goals when we did the land use update, was to come up with a strategy that works and that's legitimate. So, there are people, oh, it's not fair. This guy got a variance and he didn't do anything. And so that's why I bring it up, because I think it's unfair to the applicant to say, oh yeah, this is great concept. We need housing, we need this. It's a beautiful project, whatever. And then later pull the rug out from under them when it's an unrealistic expectation to get such a massive variance from what the code says.
Alan? I appreciate your concern, and this has come up before. To oversimplify, from my point of view, Manitou is a collection of unique properties. And the goal of the Planning Commission, the community, and certainly the planning department is to find a best use for that property, which may, well, in many, many cases, includes variances. Now, I think you're quite right. The land use code should be respected and it should be workable. Personally, on this project, I have no problem with the density. I'm like Mike, hats off to you for increasing housing in a community that's very short of it. I'm a little bit pressed to believe that $1,300 to $1,900 is affordable for a teacher or a police officer who works in Manitou, but that's kind of outside our purview. Yeah, I think what we're aiming to do here is work in concept with coordinate with the developer to realize a very positive use for the property.
Yeah, Chair Dulwich, I'm inclined to agree with your sentiment. We are not a legislative body. The code was passed by a legislative body. The way it is set up now with zoning and the density, I feel that there was an intent behind that. What you said about was 75% over, I think that should not be taken lightly. And I'm intend to say that I know we're not at the variant stage, but I kind of agree it's a threshold issue. I don't want the applicant to expend additional money and resources going down this road, and then it come to the variant stage, and then here we are as a quasi judicial body, not a legislative body, and then potentially voting on something that throws out the land use code. So I'm not comfortable agreeing to the current density based on the zoning right now.
I think the sequence of events was spelt out very clearly by Chelsea. The applicant knows what he's up against. If we can, our job is to talk about the development as with the information that we know now. I don't know. Maybe I should ask staff, should we talk about the variance that you haven't presented without, presenting a staff report on that specific topic. Or maybe a show of hands. Just, is that appropriate? If, based on what we know now, would we vote for or against a variance? I mean, is that appropriate? I don't know.
So, thank you for asking that question. I think you're right in directing the conversation towards the concept plan. However, I understand Chair Delwich and Commissioner Wilson's sentiment, and I think it does have merit to discuss kind of the overall game plan. I would caution the commission against discussing too many specifics because we don't have a firm application yet. And so I think if there are certain sticking points that, I think I might tag Ellie in on this one, but I think you can discuss generalities without discussing specifics in this instance.
Yes, hi everyone, for the record, Elizabeth Laboon, CPC attorney. Just to chime in here, I think a discussion is totally fine. A vote, even if informal, for an item that has not been placed on the agenda, even however related to the issue that is on the agenda, I would caution you away from conducting such a vote. So a discussion is appropriate, but a formal vote or even a show of hands, I would not recommend. Happy to answer additional questions as well.
Well, on that note, I think we should move on to talk about something else.
Carrie?
So my thoughts on the project as presented, I think it's an unusual site. And I think this site provides a real opportunity. I thought it was interesting, the discussion about leaning towards affordable housing or housing affordability, but I would like to see or have seen more meat or substance behind that, not just we hope it's going to be affordable. We plan to, but who knows by the time the building's built, how affordable these units might be. I would want to see some sort of, not necessarily a deed restriction because it's no wholly owned property, but something where we're saying we are going to guarantee we're going to have affordability. And I understand that's a long and involved process, but I think that as a community, from people talking to me and just having conversations, affordability in housing is such an important thing for us as a community that I think that I could see a groundswell of meetings held to build support for this might work if there was some sort of guarantee about affordability, not just we need the density to make the project pencil out. If there was, the density plus the affordability, maybe that would be more acceptable to the community. I'm not sure. But just the increased density on the face of it, I'm in agreement that I wouldn't necessarily support that.
Any other comments, thoughts? David?
Mike, I didn't understand your comment about if this is the situation, then we just would, you thought best to just move ahead. Can you identify what information would be useful to you to make a decision?
Well, I said that because the attorney just said we should not do any kind of a vote. So what's the point of talking about a variance if we can't vote on it? It's heading our way. It's going to be on the agenda at some other time. So that's when we dig in deep. But this affordability thing, I understand everything you're saying, but if it's not, you said the word guarantee. I don't that's not right, I don't think. Unless the URW that's their a requirement from their point of view, which is not in our purview either. You know, these guys are they're, according to the plan, they're making two identical buildings. They're trying to save as much money as they can to lower, you know, to have rates that are affordable. But, you know, what they end up doing is their business. It's, you know, they're gonna, you know, try to get rates that are reasonable. If the rates are too high, they're going to have vacancies. So, you know, the market is going to play out. We shouldn't put requirements or ask for guarantees from these guys. I don't think.
I would agree with what he said. I would also point out that obviously there's a ratio here between density and affordability. And if you're going to reduce density, you're going to reduce affordability. So that's certainly something that we have to consider. The other thing is, yes, there is a code, but we also have a variance process. So I don't think we should be afraid to use it.
The reason I brought up the variance process and asked Aaron to put it up there, without voting, you can look at it and make your own determination of how far you'd have to twist your logic and your brain up to find four of the 6 criteria that you could say, yeah, this is true. You know, there's no design alternatives. The enforcement of the prohibitions denies the applicant of rights enjoyed by the majority of other properties, on and on and on. Find 4. And if you can't, ask yourself, what's, you know, I think housing is essential. I love the idea of having more housing, but I want to do it properly, not break our code 1 year into having adopted it by just blowing it off and saying, it doesn't matter. You know, this is affordable housing. We need density. We need housing. That's ridiculous in my brain. You know, we can do it properly, but as Justin mentioned, it's a legislative process, not a quasi judicial, pull something out of a hat and make it up. And, you know, we don't need to break our code. We need to fix it. If there's something that we need to address this project or projects going on, this may not be the last one. But if we do it wrong this time, we're opening a can of worms for any project in the future, whether it's somebody's height variance, somebody's density, somebody's parking, whatever. They'll just say, yeah, sure. You know, look what you did on the LaFawn property. Why do, you know, the big guys with big money, they get to throw their weight around and we don't. We're wrecking it and we don't have to. You know, there are no different notions of density that could be addressed, but it's not our purview to do that. And if we do it in this quasi judicial process, we're making a joke out of the process. Why even have dimensional standards if all you have to do is say, I want a variance. I want to go to 45 feet. 35 doesn't work because I need 45. And I can't come up with 3 criteria, maybe 2 I can come up with. But look what you did for LaFawn. They didn't meet. They met 1 out of 4. Why should I have to meet 4? It's not fair. And that's the whole idea, is to keep it fair and keep the process working. And that's my thoughts on this. David?
I would like to see from the applicant and the planning department to weigh in how you would meet the requirements of the code. We've heard Alan's interpretation. There may be others which should also be considered. Either this sounds to me like a future meeting. I know, of course, time is money for you guys.
Do you mind if I weigh in first?
Sure.
Thank you. So we've had this sticking point on every variance that has come through since the code revisions. That to me, if you're constantly either A, constantly having to ask for variances, or B, constantly denying variances, that tells me that the code maybe doesn't quite fit the needs of the community. And I think if there is a will of this commission to open the discussion into adding criteria or revising the variance criteria in another way, that is a conversation that we could have. And perhaps it could play with the timeline of this development, but that is something that staff needs to be instructed to do by city council.
Yeah, just counter that. The fact that people ask for variances doesn't mean the community at large is in favor. For example, height. The community has made it very clear what their opinion is on height. And people asking for a variance doesn't mean the community wants it. And I think we have to be very careful. And the reason I'm bringing this whole thing up is I don't want to pull the rug out from under these people who are making a good faith effort to do something that they think the community wants. I just caution against sending the wrong message and then, putting ourselves in a, painting ourselves in a corner where, oh yeah, we told them, yeah, we like this concept. And now we have to choose either to break the code or to break their project and waste them a lot of money. That's the whole idea of this concept plan. I commend them for coming forward and saying, hey, how does this look, before they really stuck their necks out.
This is a very unique process, this concept plan review. I think I mentioned to you, and I just don't have experience with that. I thought it could be helpful to us and to you all. I'm hearing a lot of concern from people. I don't know, Mr. Armstrong, that we can make any economic sense out of trying to do what I think would amount to 40-some units on the site to make it at all affordable. I can't imagine what the unit rents would be. I mean, honestly, I'd be guessing it'd be $3,000 a unit. I really am taken back by some of the discussion. I apologize. The next steps for us to formally file are very costly, time consuming, but I've heard enough concern tonight that I don't know that I'm prepared to do that. I'm open to other input, but it's discouraging, honestly, to be before you, to spend even the time we did and effort, because we tried to address so many of the concerns that we thought were voiced, and I think we did. And variances, I've heard them, I've experienced them. They're intended to, it's not, there's never an exact box that they fit in. But I think when you look at the merits of the variance and what I believe exists here that it's going to provide, I think there's a reason to support it. But honestly, I'm real concerned about taking the next step. I appreciate the opportunity. I'd love to be open for other input. I don't know what the process is. I know there's some limits on what can happen outside the meeting, but at this point, I'd be hesitant to step forward again with the plan, something like this. But I do appreciate you hearing us tonight. Thank you.
All right, say something, please. I don't blame you for what you just said. But it's there, just so you know the process. You saw the sequence of events that was pointed out, and we are the final authority on variances, but anybody can appeal any decision we make. So I don't know what your financial damage is between now and then. I would be very discouraged if I heard what you heard too, but there's 7 of us for starters. I know we're not going to take a vote, but I think you can tell how I feel. So there may be light at the end of the tunnel, but I don't blame you for feeling the way you do. But just so you know the process, you got to go through the variance. If you don't like the decision, anybody can appeal it to city council, and then city council is going to be the ultimate authority. But by that time, you're probably you're going to be in developing some other town and pull out of Manitou.
Anybody like to make a motion? Well, I think, my understanding is we need to weigh in on the concept plan.
Yes, we are expecting a decision tonight. We do have these motion language options for you.
Well, personally, I like the concept, and I find ourselves in a very difficult situation with our land use development code and the efforts we made to try to choose that language that really fits the needs of the community. It seems as though for me, in this particular situation with that property, if we cannot make it financially feasible to have residential housing there, and there does not appear to be much optimism about putting in retail, I'm at this point, I would be prepared to let the concept go forward and deal with the variance at a different time.
Is that a motion?
Do you mind if I clarify just one point at the end of your statement? The decision made on the concept plan does not preclude a submission in the future. So if you were to vote against, they could still come in with an application. Similarly, if you vote for it, they could choose not to. So it is a pretty much a non-binding decision.
All right.
My favorite.
Okay. Therefore, I move to approve concept plan at 123 Manitou Avenue based upon the findings of that the request meets the review criteria for granting a concept plan set forth in City Code Section 18.06.4.10.e.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? Then let's vote. All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, so the motion carries 4-3. And thank you. Okay, we'll move on to other business, notice of council action and updates.
Thank you. So I put this item on the agenda just because I think I missed a meeting in there somewhere, and I wasn't sure if staff had updated you that the approval of the demolition associated with the minor development plan at 328 Manitou Avenue, the Green Willow, was approved by City Council. And if there is another item for staff update, if you don't mind if I jump into that. You may notice that we have a new planner here this evening. This is Zach Davison. It is your first week-ish. And he joins us as a planner one. If you'd like to say hello.
Hello. Nice
Hello.
to meet all of you. I've met Alan.
Yeah.
I think it was last week
Yeah.
we met.
Anything you'd like to add or tell about yourself? It's
I have nothing unique to say. I'm excited for the opportunity. And I'm really enjoying these experiences.
great. Thank you. Anyone have any other?
Is Ethan still with us?
He is not. He went back across no man's land to Colorado Springs at the planning department.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one thing that somebody mentioned to me. You know, on our city website, there's an archive area. And I think a couple of years ago, we got way behind and then caught up. And it looks like we're a couple months behind now, and just, we've had changes in responsibilities, and before we get way behind, I wanted to just point that out. Or, someone complained to me, like, why isn't it in the archive? And it's only 1 month. I think it's only the June meeting, or no, maybe the May meeting also. But anyway, it just
We are also a little bit behind in our HPC minutes. I did overhear Erin training our new administrative assistant on how to upload those documents today.
Yeah.
So we have a new administrative assistant, a new neighborhood services officer, a new planner one. And so we are well on our way to being fully staffed once more.
and we have a new neighborhood services, you said?
Yes, Larry St. John.
Oh.
And so he started, I think, 2 weeks ago, and he is out there in the community and saying hi, and he has the same phone number as previous neighborhood services officers if you need to get a hold of him.
Right.
Yeah,
Thanks.
we are getting caught back up again. We've had those 3 positions vacant for about a month, so we just haven't gotten to that. So thank you for your patience on that. We do always have the agendas and agenda packet, the link that we send to you guys. That is as part of the calendar on like the Planning Commission page. You can always access agendas and agenda packets there. So that's there. It's always there, so it doesn't require sort of some of the manual work that the Documents on Demand does. I can
And the draft minutes
Yeah.
are uploaded as part of
Yeah.
the packets.
Oh, yeah, and I know, and you can even go back. The amazing thing, you can go back months and months in the calendar and it's all still there. It's just not in that one repository that someone was. But I think it's,
Yes.
it's there, so.
Thank you for bringing that up, Erin. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen just kind of for the good of the order, if that's okay.
Sure.
So on each of our boards, this is the Planning Commission. We have the Planning Commission page. The web link here is how we call into these meetings. If you want to have public comment, that's the link that the public would use if they want to just participate and don't plan to comment. We do live stream to YouTube. This has some additional information, but here in this calendar section of the Planning Commission, it has this as the selected category, and you can look at the, today's meeting. If I were to click on that, it would pull up our agenda and agenda packet, anything that was included in the agenda packet. If the online viewer is not their preference, they can also download any of these files here and print those as PDFs for more easy review. This is the area that it goes to automatically when we publish from Civic Clerk. The area that documents and ordinances or that Documents on Demand software is the one that we are usually, sort of updating after the fact as sort of that record. So whatever that final agenda and agenda packet that is taken to the commission for review is. But this is another resource that is always current. So I wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thanks. Anything else anybody have? And the meeting's adjourned.